Welcome to this week's work session. I'll go ahead and just kick us off and ask the clerk to call us to, well, not to call us to order. I'll call us to order. Ask the clerk to take the roll.
Bajent.
Here.
Clegg.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Woodings.
Here.
All present.
Great, thank you. Okay, first up, we have the climate action roadmap, and we've got both Steves here, Steve Burgos, but Steve Hubble, I think, will be presenting. I just want to kick this off in sharing my excitement for the work product that you're about to see and the plans that our staff has developed. It was a year ago that we said we wanted to set out to develop a roadmap that would guide the goals that we have with regard to climate action. But importantly, with our goals with regard to clean electricity and carbon neutrality. And the reason that this matters is because as our community changes, as the world changes, ensuring that we are leading on climate, that we're not only mitigating for the impacts, but thinking about how we turn the challenges into opportunities means prosperity for our people. And the team in Public Works, our Climate Action Division, has done, I believe, an excellent job at capturing all the different elements that comes into the work that we do as a city and the impact that it has on our lives as residents, and put that into this plan that will get us to the goals that we have that next week, if you all agree, we'll be able to act on. And so with that, Steve, I'll ask you to jump in, and thanks for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, council members. It's really nice to see everybody in person. Super excited to share our work with you that we've been up to the past few months and give you an update on our climate action roadmap. I'll ask your forgiveness in advance. There's a fair amount of content in the slides, given the technical nature of the work, but try to move through those pretty quickly to ensure that we have time for your questions and discussion. So why a climate action roadmap is where we wanted to start this afternoon. All of us are familiar with some of the global impacts that are being seen, particularly in the last couple of years with record hurricane seasons in the Atlantic, fires of global significance in the Amazon and Australia. And then certainly in the region, we're no stranger to those impacts as well, with record fires in Washington and Oregon last summer, air quality impacts, even though those fires were quite far away, the impact of them was seen here. That's a photo last September of our skyline. And then also the photo in the bottom left is the drought severity index from a couple weeks ago. So you're seeing historic level drought severity in the West. And starting to encroach a little bit in our own area as well. And when we start to see these effects in real life, it aligns very well with the work that was presented in the climate adaptation assessment, which was developed a couple years ago to start to model and project the changes that our area would see from climate change. And wanted to point to one specific example on hotter days. We recently pulled weather data from the last 80 years from the National Weather Service at Boise Airport. And we did an analysis on the change in the average annual high and low temperatures, and are seeing appreciable increases in both of those over that time period. So, we often think a lot about the global or regional impacts, but we're seeing these impacts right here in town. And as you all know, I spend a lot of my time in the technical world and the solutions world, but I think ultimately it's important to reaffirm that our why is our people, their health, and then jobs, the economic opportunities that potentially come along with the climate solutions that we'll be looking at with the roadmap. And wanted to talk a bit about our journey. You'll see the roadmap and travel theme integrated into the slides a bit. But Boise is not a stranger to this work. As we went to put the slides together, it really struck me that we have been using clean energy in our geothermal system for over 100 years, really the innovators for a long time. And now we've seen that system grow into the largest heating district in the United States and likely one of the larger ones in the world. We've also done a lot of work with energy and buildings. As you'll recall, back to 2019 with the clean electricity goal setting in Boise's Energy Future, and then certainly numerous initiatives with net zero construction, with all electric construction, and then with green building in the community and in city buildings. Also work with the natural environment with open space preservation, parks, and urban forestry. Recently with the City of Trees Challenge initiative. And these are just a couple examples. Obviously, there's numerous more that we don't have time to go through today. But what we've worked to do with the climate roadmap is take all these existing programs and begin to integrate them into one document under an umbrella of climate action. And I'll show you in a few slides how we started to bring them together. And then lastly, most recently highlighting the formation of the Climate Action Division last summer and our work since then to develop this roadmap and our plan for bringing our city government and our community to carbon neutral. Jumping into the details of the roadmap. So with the document, we know we need a plan for climate action, but we also know that this is a time-sensitive and critical issue. So we wanted to do our best to get that plan in place, but also not spend an extra amount of time planning to jump to and focus on our implementation. As mentioned, we're using the roadmap to organize our existing and future initiatives, and then also to identify climate action goals and prioritize opportunities and actions, all of which I'll talk through in just a second. And then most significantly, we want the roadmap to be a living and evolving document. Policy, technology, and community needs in this area are changing frequently, and we want the roadmap to reflect that vision of something that moves along with those changes that are happening around us every day. And so with that, I'll bring in the elements of the roadmap in an outline format here, and we'll animate those sequences in those slides, but I'll also subsequently go through each one of them in detail. So we start our outline with our vision and goals, building on the city's vision to create a city for everyone. And then the proposed roadmap has 3 goals that are identified: a carbon neutral goal for our municipal operations or city government by 2035, a carbon neutral goal for our community by 2050, and then also a qualitative goal that deals with resilience and adaptation for the community. And the reason we took both approaches is when we look nationwide at other climate action plans, we see that a lot of cities take both of those approaches. They take a numeric approach towards reducing emissions, and then also a more qualitative approach to getting the community ready for changes that may be coming from climate change, regardless of what progress we're able to make in reducing emissions. And then from there, we built in guiding principles that are established throughout the plan. 3 of them: the first to advance equity, the second to improve human health and wellness, and the third to grow the climate economy. And those match several of the themes that the mayor mentioned in her introduction, and obviously align with a lot of the work over the years building to this point. From there, we identified 7 priorities, and we mapped them on a scale from left to right, as you see here on the slide, from those that are where we're focused on reducing emissions, like in our energy and transportation systems, and those where we're focused more on building resilience, like water, the natural environment, and food systems. We developed a new priority, the one that's right in the middle, innovation and engagement. And the purpose there was, we had some activities that apply to all 6 of these areas. And also we wanted to acknowledge the need for innovation. We don't have all of the answers yet, and you'll see some of that. So we certainly need more solutions, more opportunity. And then also we need the community to come along with us in this process. The city has a lot of control in our own facilities, but certainly to get to the community goal, it's going to take work across our residences and businesses to help us get to the goals that we want to achieve. And then last but not least, within those 7 priority areas, we've identified a number of opportunities, 23 to be exact, and think of those as the focus areas where we really start to get in to the particular type of work and specific actions that we need to do to meet the goals, to build in the guiding principles and focus on the priorities. With that, I'll now go through and break down each of those 4 sections in detail, starting with the community climate goals. So again, carbon neutral by 2050 is what's proposed. We use our community greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which you see in the graphic on the left there, as the starting point as to how we measure our path towards going to zero. And then I thought it was important to take a second to address how we define carbon neutral. We're looking at this in a sort of a phased approach or a step approach. So the first priority is to reduce emissions. So to take that pie chart that you see on the left and get that down as close to zero as possible. And the current version of the roadmap spends most of its effort focusing in that area. From there, we'll also look to sequester emissions. We have activities currently like our City of Trees Challenge, where we have the potential to account for carbon that we're removing by current or future actions. There'll be more of that to come. This version of the roadmap sets up as to how we might think about analyzing and quantifying that going forward. And then our last priority would be to offset emissions. So let's say under best case scenario, there are certain emissions that we're not able to reduce. Council in future years could look at options to offset those. And then, as I mentioned in the prior slide, really our community goals are based in this concept of community in action. We really need participation of residents and businesses to support all the actions across the 7 priority areas. Some of you recall from the Boise's Energy Future discussion, we had a somewhat complex chart noting the path as to how we got to 100% clean energy. And this is the same analysis here for how we would get to carbon neutral. And I'll ask you not to focus too much on the content, but just want to drive home 3 key points. First, that the path to carbon neutral takes a number of different actions, which you see by the different colors that are represented there. Second, the solid gray or the dark gray space in the middle, those are solutions that we don't have just yet. So that is where we need advocacy, policy, innovation to help us get to carbon neutral. And then last but not least, just to share with this analysis and the graphic that we did do a pretty robust analysis to determine that the goals that we proposed were ambitious, but also achievable. And then quickly, just the same pie chart for city government, obviously a much smaller piece of the pie, one that we have control over in our own operations. But again, the goal to get that number down to zero or as close to it as possible by 2035. And you all are no stranger to some of the actions that we're taking to work towards that. And we think there's tremendous opportunity to lead by example with our work and then share our successes and challenges with the community to help in their endeavors. Wanted to take a minute to point out that the goals that we set with Boise's Energy Future are still applicable. They are still in play. They're not going away. What they do is essentially serve as milestones or part of the path of moving towards carbon neutrality. So for example, our 2030 100% clean electricity goal would be a milestone or a target towards that 2035 carbon neutral goal, so on and so forth. And then certainly there are examples within other work areas that would be interim targets in the roadmap as well. The guiding principles, again, a lot of content here, but mostly wanted to share with council that there was a lot of thought built in writing the roadmap into what these principles mean to the city and will mean in our work going forward. So you can see a little more detail around those three principles of equity, human health and wellness, and then growing the climate economy. And I'll show you in the subsequent slide how we tried to integrate those into the opportunities and actions. So jumping back to priorities. So we had the 7 priority areas, which you see in the different colors there. And then these are the 23 opportunities that are identified within each of those 7 areas. Again, many work areas that you're familiar across the scope of city operations. I think one question that we've seen here, the items that are bolded are the top 5 that have the biggest contribution to reducing emissions. And the items that are in italics are the top 5 that have the most significant support for community resilience. And I'll talk through how we calculated that as well. And so each of these 23 opportunities in the roadmap has a detailed breakdown that I'll walk through in animations here through this slide. Each has a very specific target. In some instances, quantitative, like you see here. This one happens to be dealing with rooftop solar or distributed renewable energy. Others have more qualitative targets when we don't have a numeric goal or it's a more qualitative type subject. Each opportunity was analyzed for its potential to reduce emissions and its potential to enhance resilience. And that's how we got the rankings that were shown on the prior slide. And obviously all these 23 work areas are very important, but we know that even within those, there may need to be some additional prioritization as far as what we would work on first. And this analysis helps us to start that process. Each opportunity has near-term and long-term actions identified. This is essentially the to-do list of things that we need to check off to work towards our goals. And then within those actions, you'll see examples that relate back to the guiding principles. So for example, here, this is an action that talks about structuring community solar installations to benefit community members who might not have access. So that would be an action that relates back to advancing equity. And another action here related to energy storage that would tie back to economy and jobs. Finally, the arrow indicates items that are already underway. As we talked about in sort of the journey slides, we're doing a lot of this work already, but we're bringing it now under the umbrella of climate action. And so there's numerous things that are already happening. Not all of this needs to be started from scratch. We're often asked, what does this mean to the average resident, or what does this mean to the average business? And it's a really complicated answer to provide that, because everybody's climate action is going to be a little different. We know we have some folks who are engaged now, and maybe some that were more likely to be engaged as we go down the road. So what we wanted to provide here with this visual description are some potential outcomes that we would see in a carbon neutral future. The first would be emissions-free vehicles that help improve local air quality. The second would be locally generated renewable energy that support jobs and innovation in our local economy. And the final two would be locally produced food and a healthy Boise River that support healthy lifestyles and recreation. And these are just a few examples, but thought it was important to share with council and with the community what some of the outcomes might be. So next steps pending today's discussion, our discussion up to this point would be to come back with a resolution for consideration by council, potentially at your regular meeting next week, that would adopt climate goals and the key elements of the roadmap that we walked through this afternoon. Additionally, along with that, pending approval would be a community rollout. We have had some initial discussions with stakeholders over the past month or so, but certainly there's a need for broader outreach on this to the community at large. So that would come shortly thereafter, your consideration of a vote if you were inclined to do that. And then finally, we continue our climate action implementation. As mentioned a couple of times, a lot of these initiatives are ongoing, so we will keep working on those and then add new ones as appropriate as the roadmap identifies. And so one final summary slide just to close out. The roadmap identifies vision and goals for the community, 3 guiding principles, 7 priorities that you see there, and then a number of opportunities within those priorities. I'll quickly thank staff that worked on this. A lot of work that went into this. I get the luxury to present to you, but a lot of behind the scenes from our staff and across the city to contribute that. So I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that. And with that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Steve. I really appreciate the update. There are a couple of items I'd love to dig into in a little more detail. I don't think today is the day to do that. So if we wanted to schedule some one-on-one meetings and dig into some of these, would that be possible?
Definitely.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, Council President, definitely.
And the one thing I guess I will ask up front is, it looks like to me anyway, and one of the reasons I want to dig into this, like on building efficiency and social well-being, that we might actually be able to go beyond the goals that I at least briefly saw up there from the things I know about those. And so, you know, I guess I would look at this as iterative. This is a great first step, and clearly staff has done amazing work. There are times when if your leadership gets really behind something, you can go further than you thought you could. And I guess I'd like to explore some of those.
Madam Mayor, Council President, I agree. I think it's been our intent to communicate this roadmap as an iterative and evolving document. And if you think 2 years ago to your consideration of what we approved with Boise's Energy Future, there's elements of that that are already moving along a little faster than we might have originally anticipated. And I expect you'll see the same, possibly the same type of circumstances here as these things continue to go forward.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, thank you so much, Steve. This is very, very exciting. I'm excited to see a more fleshed out roadmap. When can we expect to see that? If we have a resolution next week, are we going to like actually get a roadmap to approve as by a resolution? I guess I wasn't understanding that part.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
Council Member Woodings, the thought up to this point has been to have council approve the elements of the roadmap that we walked through today, but not the roadmap itself. And that sort of would tie to the nature of it being an iterative and evolving document. We can certainly share the current draft of the roadmap with council following up the meeting. We're making some minor clerical errors right now, but otherwise it's available to be shared.
Yeah, that would be great. I would appreciate that a lot.
And we were thinking too that we wanted the opportunity for council to weigh in and then share the goal with regard to carbon neutrality for city government and then citywide. And so much like last time around when we made the goal of 2035 as our target for 100% clean electricity, that we'd make that goal through resolution. And then the roadmap would help to get us there. But this was really the proof document to demonstrate that while it's a reach, staff can envision how we could reach that goal if that was to be adopted by council.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I really appreciate all the work from all the folks that went into this. I think it's like Councilmember Woodings, it's really exciting to see. And I think that we're in a time right now where we need some stuff to celebrate. And it kind of seems like a good time to celebrate and to be working on some of these things. And so I hope when we get to the point where we are able to roll it out to the community, like you have outlined, that we have a way of doing that that's really engaging, because I do think that people are ready to jump on board and get involved from an organizational standpoint, from an individual standpoint. Just last week, we had a development or just a house that was super excited to get solar panels on the outside. So people are wanting to figure out ways to get involved and to be part of this effort. So I'm excited to figure out all those different ways where individuals, organizations, community partners can jump in and be on board with it.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I am as well. The outpouring of interest from the community, particularly with the announcement of the Climate Action Division last summer, has really been significant. We've been logging and tallying all the folks that we've heard from, whether on an individual basis or as groups. And I think there are going to be numerous opportunities for public involvement as we move into the implementation phase, whether it be on specific topic issues or on larger awareness, and certainly have a great community engagement team here to support us with that.
Madam Mayor, thank you. That was a great presentation, Steve. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the work that you have done to make sure that we include equity in this work. We hear a lot about the diversity part and the inclusion part in the work we do, not so much the equity. And so I really appreciate that part. Now, there is a term that you use quite frequently, resilience. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that fits into this type of work?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sanchez, sure. So we define resilience as essentially preparing the community for changes that are coming, or being able to adapt to changes that may come regardless. And you'll see that theme built in across the actions. And I think, as I mentioned in the slides, most climate action plans that we look to as examples, they include both of those elements. It's not just taking action to reduce emissions. It's also doing things to prepare the community. And when you look down and dig through a lot of the opportunities, like the example that I presented, you'd see examples of how we would propose to improve community resilience through those actions, even to the extent that one of the opportunities is really specifically focused just on resilience in terms of facilities, city facilities, preparing for emergencies, those type of situations.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, well, it looks like that's it. Thanks for being here. If you would share the draft that you've got with council, I think that'd be great. And then look forward to discussing further the goal next week.
Thank you.
Next up, we've got, hi, Melinda. It looks like Melinda is here, and Maureen, for the HUD 5-year consolidated plan update.
So good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having us this afternoon. As you all know, Melinda and I are here today to kind of talk through the 2021 to 2026 Housing and Urban Development Consolidated Plan that our division will submit to HUD in mid-August. And then, as you're also aware, our team has been going through some big staff transitions and backfilling some vacancies, and then also recruiting for new positions. So Melinda has really stepped up in a huge way to ensure that we were able to walk through this consolidated plan process in a way that meets all of the regulations, but then also a way that we have done some meaningful community engagement around the goals that we have settled on. And then the other kind of part that I just wanted to frame up for you before I pass it on to Melinda is that although this consolidated plan speaks directly to the specifics around projects and goals that we have planned for the use of HUD funds, specifically home and CDBG, I did want to assure you that increasingly we're kind of taking this, what has been a bit of a silo around HUD funds, again, home and CDBG, and making sure that those tuck in and leverage the other resources and initiatives that we have going around the city for housing affordability generally to ensure that we do in fact have a home for everyone. So to that end, although today's focus is on home and CDBG, our team will be back in front of you, I believe in 2 weeks and then in another week or so after that to present some additional data around a housing needs analysis that talks not only about the city of Boise, but also Ada County at large, what our needs are, what our action steps and goals are on the go forward.
Hi there. Thank you for having us today. We appreciate the chance to talk with you all, and it's lovely to be here in person. So I wanted to walk you through the consolidated plan process that we've been undertaking. This started out actually in 2018, so it's been kind of on our radar and something that we've been working towards for quite a few years now. It started out with the community needs assessment and kind of a data analysis that was produced in the community development analysis that you all have had a chance to see, and I'm happy to share again if you haven't looked at that in a little while. But that really was kind of the information gathering stage, looking at all of the data, conducting interviews with the community, and really trying to pull together a picture of what the needs in our community are right at this moment. And then, of course, taking that back out to the community and kind of sharing with them what we heard, making sure that other people had the opportunity to provide additional input, and really trying to reach as many people as possible through this process. We've done a series of interviews with people. We also just recently conducted one final community survey as part of this. It had close to 3,000 responses, or a little over 3,000 responses. So we were really pleased with all of your support in getting that out to everybody, and also with all of our community partners who helped share that with their kind of stakeholder groups as well. So after taking all of that data, looking through everything, our team moved into the kind of role of setting goals and really looking at what we could do with this funding to address those needs that were addressed by the community or raised by the community. And then, of course, also out of all of those goals, what are our priorities and where does it really make sense for us to be putting the bulk of our time and effort and this funding? So right now we're in this process, we're drafting all of these plans. And then, of course, every year we have to measure our kind of progress towards those goals. So we do that through what we call the CAPER, the Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. HUD loves an acronym. So that's our yearly way to assess how we're doing in meeting the goals that we set as part of this consolidated plan. So you'll see that coming in the fall every year after this whole plan is kind of approved and finalized. This is the timeline for you all, just so you can see where we are at currently. This spring, we've been working on drafting all of those reports, and they were put out for an initial round of public input. That just wrapped up at the end of May, and then we've been working to incorporate comments received from the community and also kind of final changes, edits to these documents. We're getting ready to put them out for one final round of public input. That will actually start next week. So they'll be available for another month to receive feedback from the community. And of course, from any of you or other partners who want to share comments on this. And then we'll be back here in front of you all on July 20th with our finalized version of the consolidated plan, also our annual action plan. So within the larger consolidated plan, which guides the next 5 years, each year we have an annual action plan, which contains the specific projects that we'll be doing for that year. So we'll be bringing both of those documents to you on July 20th, and you'll have a chance to review beforehand, of course. Once you have had a chance to look through and approve, if you would like, they go on to the process of being submitted to HUD and for that final approval before we are ready to move forward with those projects and activities. Just so you have an idea of the kind of funding that we're talking about, we've received our kind of initial letter from HUD saying what funding we will be receiving for the next program year. So it's a little bit kind of different the way we usually talk about fiscal years. So HUD operates a year behind. So program year 21 for them will be starting this fall when we begin our fiscal year 22. So we're looking at 1.45 million in community development block grant funds and a little over 800,000 in home investment partnerships funding. The other funding we have to work with comes from our revolving loan fund and the program income that we receive from loans that are paid off and interest that's paid on those loans. That funding can only be used for additional loans made back out to the community. So it's replenished by the community and then given back out in the form of home improvement loans or home ownership loans. So these are the goals, and I'll get into a little bit more detail about each of them here in just a moment. But again, of course, first and foremost, looking at opportunities to increase access in the inventory of affordable housing within our community. And of course, looking at how we can better support people in our community experiencing homelessness and continue to wrap those services around those individuals. Increasing neighborhood equity was also identified as an opportunity for us moving forward. We've done some work in this space using community development block grants in the past, but there's more opportunity for us to do a better job of engaging with the community and really making really meaningful investments in those neighborhoods. Also, of course, supporting the nonprofits and community partners that we have that offer services within our community, and then looking at ways that we can preserve affordable housing units that already exist within our community. So a little bit more detail here, really specifically for this, looking at opportunities to increase the availability of affordable housing for those who are most vulnerable in our community. So those making, 50 to 30% or even lower of the area median income specifically. And I know Maureen will be back to talk to you all soon about the specific needs in our community, but really looking at how these funds can be used to address those on kind of the lower income scales. And then also people who are specifically vulnerable. So folks who might have disabilities, seniors within our communities, and then people who are either currently experiencing homelessness or on the verge of potentially experiencing homelessness. This one is really looking at how we can continue to support the work that our continuum of care is doing and our partners in that field, helping people with rapid rehousing, helping to support those services that folks need to be able to take advantage of if they are experiencing homelessness. And then also looking at ways to boost permanent supportive housing and those types of things that directly can move people from experiencing homelessness into a secure place of their own. Looking at neighborhood equity, there's a few different lenses that we are kind of excited to look at this through. The first is looking to make sure that people have access to internet. This has been kind of a new activity that HUD has put some emphasis around. It's not one that we've typically done in the past, but definitely one over the last year that has been raised as a really important issue within our community, making sure that everybody has equal access to be able to access services online. So this is a great opportunity for us to partner with other city departments, Public Works and our IT departments to be able to see what opportunities we have to bring this federal funding in to support kind of investment in this area. The other piece of this are looking at other types of public improvements that we can look at in the transportation fields, better connectivity, better safety for people who walk and bike in our neighborhoods, and then other amenities that make our neighborhoods safe and comfortable and enjoyable places for everybody. Increasing support services. So of course, we as the city don't directly offer these services, but we do want to be able to support the nonprofits throughout our community. And we do that through a grant process each year. So putting this funding out to be available to them and then letting them share with us what they need this funding for. Unfortunately, it's not a large amount of the funding that we can put towards this. There is a 15% cap on the amount of funding that we receive overall that can go towards these public services. But we do receive applications every year and we do allocate out everything that we can to those community organizations working in this field. And it's everything from medical services to mental health services, childcare, food pantries, kind of everything serving those most vulnerable people in our community. And then finally, looking at ways that we can preserve affordable housing units that already exist within our community. So this is really looking to support people who might already own their home, but they aren't able to make the repairs necessary to keep their home in good condition. We can do everything from new roofing, weatherization, new windows, kitchen appliances if needed for energy upgrades, really anything that's needed within those homes to improve safety and health and make sure that things are up to code and make sure that people continue to have a valuable asset and a safe place for them to live within our community. So looking at opportunities to preserve affordable housing there and also keep people in their homes that they already own and prevent that from being kind of converted into market rate housing. We're also looking here in this program to be able to expand a little more to offer this for multifamily developments as well. It's always been available for them, but the program hasn't been well known. So we will be working on opportunities to kind of expand marketing around that and letting people know that we do have this resource available. And I think with that, Maureen is going to share a little bit with you about some of the projects that we have planned specifically for this upcoming year.
Thanks, Melinda, and thanks, Mayor and Council again. I know that Councilmember Woodings and a couple others had some questions and just kind of a reminder flag about what projects are underway and which are either conditionally awarded or that we're sort of in negotiation. Trying to get those projects across the finish line. So I won't touch on all of these. These were detailed in a Friday memo that went out last week to you all. I'm so happy to answer any specific questions that you might have about them. But 6th and Grove, of course, is just under construction, essentially right outside our door. That's 45 income restricted units that our home funds are leveraging. Autumn Gold and the development at Maple Grove and Quarry Lane is actually 9 units of single family home ownership. So we buy down the purchase price on behalf of the buyer. That will be the same for Cole cottages at Fairview and Cole through NeighborWorks as well. And then those next 3 around the crosswalk and the 2 playgrounds really tuck under that neighborhood equity goal. So the ones that we are sort of marching towards closing right now, there's 2 at LEAP Charities. One is leveraging home funds and the other is leveraging CDBG. The Whitney Commons is a CDBG AC rehab project, acquisition rehab. And then the LEAP Charities at Collister Church on Taft is a new construction, single family rental. And then LADA, working closely with that developer and IHFA, they are up against some cost run issues at the moment because of the increase in construction costs. And actually 6th and Grove has been experiencing that as well, just in terms of the material cost between when the project started and sort of where we're at now and getting that underwritten and the loan actually closed. And then finally, and I know I'm kind of speeding through these, but finally, the Catch office remodel, this one's a little bit of a different one for us, but it's really born out of the tremendous growth that nonprofit has done over the last, I would say 18 months to 2 years, but particularly through 2020 as they helped Our Path Home and their continuum of care respond to COVID and expand the resources available. So they're in deep need of an expanded and remodeled office space so that we can meet confidentially with clients and get them better connected and connected more quickly to permanent housing resources. So with that, I think that Melinda and I can stand for any questions you have. And then just again, a reminder, we'll be back in a couple weeks to talk about housing affordability generally, and then back in July with the completed consolidated plan and our annual action plan for your review and approval before we submit it to HUD.
Madam Mayor.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maureen and Melinda. And I appreciated that bit of the memo that we received, really getting a better idea of what is currently going on, what we have to look forward to, and it helps us think about where the gaps might be And I think that you nailed it when you were talking about increasing costs of building. And it makes it, every time the costs increase, it makes it more difficult to build new housing that's affordable, because, you know, the more the costs are, the more it is for rent to recoup the cost of building. So I'm wondering, and I think that we've talked about this before, and you touched on it a little bit with preserving existing affordable housing. But have you really looked at all the opportunities around preservation of existing affordable housing, or using the resources that we have to maybe create more affordable housing out of things that are maybe already built, but maybe don't fall into some of those lower income affordability categories? Does that make sense?
Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, I think so. Let me offer a little bit of comment and then let me know if I'm in the ballpark there. That type of sort of inventory and exploration is certainly on the list. What we have found, particularly as it relates to that RLF, the revolving loan fund, is that it's actually not serving the need in the way that it used to. And so what we need to be able to do as a staff, as we continue to kind of get staffed up and get trained up, quite frankly, on these two programs, is adjust and pivot what we do with that revolving loan fund to better meet the current market. And I know you all well understand this, that we're in an unprecedented time, but that also means we have an opportunity, particularly given some of the ARP funds coming into the community, and how we can start to stack benefits to leverage dollars and stretch those further. That also, I kind of want to frame this up for you too. That also means that we'll have to say no to some projects, and those may very well be worthwhile projects. But we have to sort of make some policy decisions around, is this the highest and best use of this particular dollar? I know Melinda shared kind of the program year 21 allocation, and it's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, right? So how do we plan for that on an annual basis, but also within that 5-year consolidated plan timeframe, while also taking into consideration what's happening in the greater community, be it leveraging our land holdings, land acquisition, city general fund, how we can partner with other stakeholders that are operating in this space to make sure that we can A, get aligned on our priorities, and then B, make sure that we're not missing market opportunities. And that would include affordable housing preservation, not just building new.
I keep forgetting to like turn on my microphone because, you know, we're kind of new to this whole being at the dais thing these days. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate how strategic you're being about the highest and best use of each dollar. I think that that'll really help us to stretch those a little bit farther than maybe we have in the past. So thank you so much.
And Mayor, on that same kind of topic of the preserving affordable housing units, you had mentioned that it was available for multifamily units, but it hasn't been something that's been used a lot in the past. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that looks like? Is it like there's a unit that's in disrepair, it needs to be repaired, and if they do it on their own, they're going to have to increase the rent for everybody that's in there, and so they are able to apply for funds to help keep that cost down? How does that look? How would that look, I guess?
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, the way that looks is right now, or sort of historically, the community residents that are using that RLF are in owner occupied homes. And so primarily single family, some manufactured homes, sort of smaller aging housing units. What we want to, or what we're thinking about kind of targeting, is those multifamily complexes that might be aging out of affordability. So they might be low income housing tax credit projects or the like. The challenge is that it's very expensive. And so to convince a multifamily property owner to engage with us to use this fund, this resource, this fund source, if you will, that then sort of limits their profit on a go forward, because then it does age back into affordability. That's sort of the challenge there. So we have a list of multifamily complexes that we can sort of start to market to and target, if you will. We just need to fold that into how we pivot the overall strategy for how we're using our revolving loan fund, and then also what's called entitlement, the CDBG entitlement dollars. Does that help?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Maureen, Melinda. It's good to get an update on this. This may sound like an odd question because I think, continuity in these services is really important, but are there any big takeaways as you did your outreach and your planning and evaluation of things that you are recommending we change from how we've done them in the past? Is this plan pretty much a continuation of what we've done, or are there some big or even small changes that you've identified that would help? I think you hit the nail on the head, leverage the funds, the little bit of funds we have more effectively.
Mayor, Council President Clegg, that's a great question. And I think the answer is that it's a both and. So the overall arching goals have by and large stayed the same, but our tactics to meet those goals need to change in some ways. One of those I've mentioned, I think, is the RLF, and we're exploring how to do that. And whether, we keep it in some way, shape, or form, but pivot resources away from it right now, just given the market that we're in right now. The other piece that we're sort of contending with and trying to strategize around is that because of COVID, there has been some waivers in regards to certain regulations. Whether those waivers continue will also influence how we can approach, whether we fund single family home ownership, for example. So we're exploring that in earnest and making sure, like I've mentioned previously, that we really can stretch those dollars, especially given the results or preliminary results of the housing needs analysis that we have right now that really kind of paints a pretty stark picture on the deficit we have around housing affordability.
Thank you. Follow up if I might. So the next question is whether or not, the timing of this is maybe an opportunity, but also kind of hard with the ARP funds and the ERAP funds and all the other funds that we've been getting due to COVID from the federal government. Have you thought about how we could adjust how we're spending these that would help leverage those other funds that we're going to get?
Mayor, Council President Clegg, absolutely. It's certainly part of the equation. While we have a timeline that we cannot adjust and we have to get this in by mid-August, we also have some flexibility. Not that you want to go into a program year planning to amend your action plan, but we do have some flexibility to do that. And again, as the funding picture continues to shift, making sure that we stay, and I feel like I'm repeating myself. The last time I was here, I mentioned this too, but just making sure that we sort of stay nimble and flexible and not in, this is what we said we were going to do, and get kind of in that rigid line of thinking. As far as that's concerned, also, because we're dealing with by and large affordable housing developers and some of these nonprofits that need to be able to count on us when we do make a conditional commitment, sort of walking that fine line too and balancing, okay, here's what we can commit to, here's what that commitment means, and sort of when we sign the dotted line, if you will, on those agreements.
Great, thank you very much.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you so much for bringing up the issue of homeowners and how they're being affected by what we're going through now. I just want to say I would love to be in a meeting with you to discuss that further. Just again, I know what that's like, and I know it's a little bit different now than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we couldn't decide that the option for our solution would be to sell our homes because we wouldn't have gotten the prices that someone would get now. And I think even if that's the case, I think for the most part, people want to stay in their home. And so I would love to talk to you further about that.
All right, that looks like it for now. Looking forward to
Thank you.
having the next conversation on the housing needs and the roadmap forward for that. So thanks for coming tonight, both of you.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, next up, I see Sean. Oh, and Carl, great, welcome to give us an update on the Heyman House. As they're getting settled, I just want to remind council and the public that this is a project that started several years ago with an agreement to take the house from CCDC and to have arts and history involved. They're going to give us an update on where we're at. Of course, it's been a changing landscape with some of the needs and the budget around it. But I want to first touch on the value of this. This is a neighborhood with a rich history in our community, and one in particular that whose story should be and must be told. And this house is central to that project for both arts and history, but beyond arts and history for the community. There are many people interested in this project, the house, and importantly, the programming that could come from it. We're committed to making sure that we can get this facility ready for the next stages of community programming. And it's our intent that in addition to the investment that we've made, to have philanthropic partners along the way that will be involved as well. And more to come on that in the weeks and months to come. And with that, welcome back. Good to see you in person.
Yeah, good to see you, Mayor, council members. Good to see everybody in person. Just kick right off into it. So the agenda, I want to give a little background, kind of follow up.
We can't really hear you, Sean.
Can't hear you? Okay, here we go. A little bit of background on the timing, the chronology of how we got to where we are, kind of to back up what the mayor was saying. Design snapshot, we finished the design, so what it looks like and what the potential is for it, where we're at with construction. And then Carl's going to give a public art update. So the background, 2015, CCDC approached the city about the house. 2016, the city started looking at planning processes, restoring the house, doing preliminary site plans. In 2018, the house was conveyed to the city of Boise from CCDC with some funding to help get the restoration started. In 2019, we hired an architect. Public art call was made in the selection, and then we formed the task force, the Heyman House Task Force, which has helped guide some of the design. In 2020, the city entered a contract with a public artist. We completed the design last year, got building permits later in the year. We had intended to start construction last year, but with COVID, there was a lot of challenges with that. So we paused and then went out for a procurement for a construction manager. And at the end of 2020, we hired the construction manager, Guho Construction. They've spent this spring bidding out the project and getting their construction contract ready. And the public art design concept has been implemented. So quite a long path for the house. Just to orient everybody, I'm sure everybody knows where it's at, but 617 North Ash Street, right on the corner of Ash and River, adjacent to Kristen's Park and right near the Pioneer Pathway. Here's a picture from the house a few years ago. Last summer, I did some site clearing and put a construction fence around it just to get security on the house. So it looks a little different if you drive by today. And for the design snapshot for the site, it'll be a heritage planting schedule. So it's kind of those historical plants. Restoring Irma's boxwood hedge in the front of the house. There's a lot of historical pictures that have that hedge right at the front door on River Street. I need a mouse. Getting accessibility to the house. So the house is raised, elevated entrances. So we have to have accessible entrances. In the back of the house, right here, there's an elevated stage for speakers and performers. It also serves as the accessible entrance for the house. Space for future public art along River Street. So there's future potential for additional public art in the future. We're doing a landscape buffer along River Street, and hopefully That helps as the programming develops in the future for the site, helps sort of create a little bit of a buffer between river and any events or programming that are taking place. And then the entire site will be surrounded with a white picket fence that kind of matches all the historical pictures for the site. On the exterior, we're doing exterior sandstone restoration. So removing all the paint, cleaning the sandstone to the best we can. It's very sensitive because as you try to clean it, you have to be careful not to damage it. So there'll be a lot of work going with the sandstone. Complete windows and doors restored on the outside. Replace the existing domer. That's this piece up here. It's currently has louvers in it, but we're putting windows in to match the historic pictures that we've seen for the site. General restoration of all the exterior. That would include just repairing fascia, painting. There's a lot of lead paint on the house, so lead paint mitigation, those sorts of things. Then we also will be installing some security features in the outside of the some cameras and entry points, stuff like that for the get security. Structural work. I put this up here mainly because this is one of the big drivers for the request for the IBC after this presentation. Once we started in on it and the structural, we're in a floodplain. That was our first tough spot. And the structural started and we started working with our building permit folks. We realized we had to completely redo the crawl space, footings, new beams. We have to remove the interior stucco off all the inside of the walls, do new sheathing, new framing, attach that to the foundation. So as the structural can of worms started opening, it just got really like a lot. The floor plan. So we're moving, this is a new wall right here. Occupancy requires 2 restrooms. So there's currently a kitchen right here. We're shrinking the kitchen down, adding a second restroom. Lots of little accessibility upgrades in the house, a lot of like narrower doors that we have to widen, those types of things. What we did find under the carpet and linoleum is there's real nice softwood flooring under there. So we're going to try to restore the flooring, wood flooring. All the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing is out of date, so it all needs to be replaced. And we're also installing more security features in the house, like occupancy sensors, that type of thing. And then information technology. So there'll be an access point for Wi-Fi there to help support any future programming that takes place. This is a rendering that the Trout architects put together for the site. And this would be standing on Ash Street, looking west. And the design is a little different from this, but it gives a pretty good perspective of what the final product would look like. Here's another rendering this would be from Christian's Park, looking east. And you can see that sort of elevated stage area and also the ADA access area. And one final rendering from River Street. So construction approach, kind of probably for the first two months would be really focusing on the house exterior and doing all the major structural upgrades and getting long lead items in place. So like window restoration, that sort of stuff. Then we'd shift over to the house interior, and the site work would kind of be ongoing for the next quite a few months. Usually we don't like to do a lot of landscape planting till the fall. It just helps with the attrition rate. And for construction schedule, we are ready to start pending approval of an IBC after this. Pretty much I'll be on probably next one or two council meetings with the construction contract if it's approved. A normal timeline for a project like this is about 4 months, but the actual timeline I'm estimating through 2021, really focusing on flexibility for the construction manager and quality control. This is another driver for the increase in budget. We've seen pretty volatile market conditions recently, like across the board, like supply chain issues, just ordering anything. So one of the strategies is give him more time to try to help keep the cost down as much as we can on the project. Yep.
Madam Mayor, members of council, nice to see you all. Thanks for the time. I'm just going to provide a very quick update on where we're at with the public art project here for Irma's Wall. Again, looking at, this is a little bit different rendering from Trout Architects looking west at the site. We're going to be addressing the new concrete wall as part of the parking facility of the townhome project just to the north of the site. We've gone through an easement process and executed an easement with the property owner there to ensure that we have access, the ability to maintain the artwork through the life of the project. We began collaborating with the Irma Hayman House Task Force back in 2019 to develop the call to artists. We bid it competitively, selected 3 finalists, brought the 3 finalists to Boise in spring of 2020, just before the pandemic. Interviewed the finalists and ultimately selected Vinny Bagwell, who's a figurative sculptor from Yonkers, New York. Vinny has a storied history, a pretty extensive history working in the public realm, specifically working in figurative sculptural works and really telling the narratives of minority communities. So she was a really great fit for this project. I've included a couple examples of her previous work just to set the context and the expectations for what the actual deliverable of the final project will be. So these are 2 examples showing her work in low relief, wall displayed figurative sculpture. The proposal that Vinny has put forward has been presented to the task force and to the Arts and History Commission and been approved through the Arts and History Commission. And this is a schematic showing that northern boundary of the parking garage wall, as if you're standing with looking north. Vinny really spent a lot of time working through arts and history with Brandy Burns, our historian, and working with family members of Irma Hayman to search out historic images, hear narratives and stories about Irma and her life spent at the house at Ash Street and within the River Street neighborhood. And through that research, Vinny has developed this proposal, which really focuses on bringing Irma's intimate life out into this new public space. So she's taken the form of creating these series of vignettes and objects that one might find on someone's dresser or on a mantle in a home space. The artwork sort of speaks chronologically to Irma's life, starting with a portrait of her as a young woman, and then ending with her on her 100th birthday. She didn't live to be over 100 years old. So we felt that was worth acknowledging. In between, there are different aspects that relate to the family band, places where she worked in Boise, and to some of the anecdotal stories that the family told us. Accompanying the images, so what we're seeing here is historic images that are used as reference. And so the actual final product will be low relief, cold cast bronze resin. So it'll look very much like a bronze sculpture. It has a very thin patina of bronze on the surface of it. And so these images are just for reference and will be translated into that into a state much like the previous artworks with a smooth black patina. And these artworks will have gold highlights coming through that black patina. We're also working to resurface the wall, which is currently rough-hewn concrete. So it'll be a nice smooth surface to accommodate the artworks. Just to highlight a couple of the specific images, we sourced a really nice image of Irma as a young woman. So this is the opening portrait. These are accompanied also by sculpted frames that are kind of referencing the period of time as well. The sculptural detail of the ballerina, there's also a teacup. The ballerina references a story of Irma Hayman and her family experiencing racism in Boise. So this will help to serve as a touch point for historic interpretive information. We'll have a plaque that will accompany the work to help to highlight these stories and provide a little bit more information about each piece. This is a portrait of Irma, and Vinny has set Irma in the context of the historic River Street neighborhood, so showing some of the actual built environment of much of that lost architecture in place. And so the project is currently in design development and implementation. This is a shot of work in progress that Vinny is currently working on. This is the portrait of Irma. So this shows a little bit of her working process. So she's first sculpting each and individual piece by hand in clay and going through sort of an iterative process to develop each of these individual images and objects. So she's just getting into implementation now and plans to be wrapped up by the end of calendar year 21. So we're planning for maybe it's feasible that we can install in the winter, but probably more likely in spring 2022. With that, I'll stand for questions along with Sean.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you for that presentation. Looks like it's going to be a great project. How will citizens take advantage of using this as an event space?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Thompson. The particular programming of the space has yet to be worked out in terms of details. There will be public access into the site from both the east and west sides of the site, from Ash Street and then also from Christen's Park. And so the space will be open and accessible. The lawn space is intended to host gatherings outside with that elevated stage. There's actually 2 stage locations within the landscape plan. So it's intended to be flexible and support maybe small musical performances or lectures or talks, or even just small gatherings.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Thank you both so much for that presentation. What I love about this project is that it speaks to, even though we are growing quickly in the city of Boise, there's still this element of history that's living and that's ongoing, and the connections that people still have to each other. I had the honor of being a mentee of Nina Madry, who is the late wife of Dick Madry, who is Miss Irma's grandson, and a dear friend of Angelina, who is her great-granddaughter. And I think acknowledging people like Miss Irma, people who I don't think when folks outside of Boise think of Boise, Idaho, would think of her as being a Boisean. And I think it really speaks to us as a city, as an organization, that we would uplift someone like Miss Irma, who contributed something very valuable to our city, and that is a welcoming place for newcomers to our city during a time when it was dangerous for people of color, especially Black people, to come to this part of the country. And I think this, along with the mayor's upcoming proposal that we honor Senator Buckner Webb, who is also, I think she's on the task force. I think it really is timely, considering what we have been going through in our country and specifically in our community. It just makes me so proud to be a part of this organization and to be a Boisean and an Idahoan. And I just, on a personal note, thank you so much for your hard work on this.
All right. Well, yes, thank you both. Appreciate the presentation tonight. The next up, we have an IBC that given time, Mike's here to answer questions if there are any. And then we also have an executive session.
Madam Mayor, council members, we have 5 interim budget changes for your consideration today. The first is regarding the Heyman House project, which you just heard the presentation. And the budget request from Arts and History and Public Works is for a $350,000 increase to that project. As they mentioned, goal that could be completed yet this year. Unless you have questions, I will go on to the other 4, and feel free to stop me. The second budget change is also in the capital fund, a new capital project for parking meter modem replacement. By the end of the year, the parking meters need new modems to allow credit card payments to continue. And this project is to get that going, to start replacing these soon. And then the remaining ones will be in the fiscal year 22 budget. We will present in 2 weeks. So that's $40,000 one time. The third budget change is in the fire department, also a capital fund project, a new project for $23,000 to construct a concrete pad at the fire training center. This is for training and vehicle extrication so that they can clean up, so we don't have chemicals and such going into the gravel pad that is there now. The fourth budget change is a position request in the general fund to add a strategic real estate manager to the mayor's office. Currently, individual departments are managing their real estate matters with a committee, and there's enough work now and things going on with growth in different properties and different strategic initiatives that a position is being requested. This would be built into the FY22 budget, and the FY21 request would be $35,000. And then the last budget change is also the general fund, public works for streetlight accident repairs. Basically, we need to increase the minor repairs and maintenance budget to fund additional streetlight repairs. Just with growth, we've had more streetlights that have been hit in vehicle accidents. The risk management fund does reimburse public works. There's insurance, there's some leakage, if you will, in risk management to cover these costs. But for public works, they get reimbursed, and we just need more funding so that we can continue to keep up with the needs and the streetlights that are being repaired. So with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Madam Mayor, I would move that we approve the interim budget changes as presented for June 8th, 2021.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Clerk, will you call the roll?
Woodings.
Yes.
I'm sorry, was that Woodings?
Oh, sorry. Didn't hear you.
Wait, I didn't hear
I
anything.
didn't, I thought I heard Clay.
We could just start over. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajan.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Excellent, thank you. And we do have an executive session as far as I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I move that we go into executive session, personnel, land acquisition records exempt from public disclosure, pending probable litigation, communicate with risk management regarding pending probable claims and labor contract, Idaho Code 742061 1B, C, D, F, I, and J.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajan.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson. All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you.